Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today I have Paulina from down in Camrose. By trade, she's a registered massage therapist, but she has a couple other things that she's been working on as well. She's working with Dr. Sarah that we had chatted with just a little while ago over at Martinson Health. Paulina, how's it going today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So tell us let's go back to the beginning. How did you get involved in healthcare?
That's a great question. There's always that big pressure when you're graduating high school, like what are you gonna do? You need to figure out your life right now. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I definitely knew I wanted to be in kind of the alternative healthcare side of things. That really spoke to me. I loved biology. I loved learning about the body. And it was actually my career counselor who was like, hey, have you ever thought about massage? It was kind of gaining a little bit more traction. He was mentioning like teachers get it, benefits, you can get a lot of clients that way, really feeds into the biology anatomy side of things. So I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm from a small town in the middle of nowhere. So I had never been for a massage. I had never given a massage aside from just like rubbing someone's shoulders as I walk by. So I was like, that sounds like a great idea. So I enrolled in school for massage therapy at the Alberta Institute of Massage with no previous experience of what it's like to get a massage. And I loved it right from the start.
That's great. That's an interesting journey into it, especially having no previous experience, but that happens in a bunch of different professions, I think, not just with massage. And where would you say is your focus now?
Well, I've been doing massage for just over 9 years now. And typically they say like a massage therapy lifespan is like 5 to 7 years, because especially if you're doing it full time, it's kind of hard on the body. And I noticed that myself, I had a lot of elbow issues. I find it sometimes really tiring depending on how many people you're working on a day and what type of work you're doing. So I kind of started shifting my focus. I got into aerial fitness, and that ended up kind of pivoting what I do a little bit more. So I'm still doing massage to some extent, but my work with clients now is I try to say, if you're a new client, we can do massage, but we have to do mobility sessions in conjunction, because I'm trying to take us from this passive mode of healing into a more active mode of healing, which will get people involved and actually an interest in their health and actually making functional change and difference instead of just like laying on a table and expecting it to just magically happen.
Okay. So when you say passive and actively doing things, or passive and active therapies, what do you mean by that? So I understand what it means, but for someone listening, what's a passive type of therapy?
Definitely. So in how I see it, when folks come in and they want a massage, they come in for 30, 45, 60 minutes. And while it may not be a great time for them all the time, especially when you're working out injuries that are quite sore, they aren't actively participating. So I'm the one doing the work. I am trying to give them exercises afterwards, but I can only spend time with them for an hour in my day. And then all the rest of the time, they're not with me. So I can't make a lot of change going forward. I can help, but if we're not assessing the patterns that they have outside of the massage room, what they do in their day-to-day life, how they're sleeping, how they're moving, we're just going to keep going over and over and over and dealing with the same kind of things. Right. So once we get into mobility, I have the opportunity to be like, let's see how you sit at your desk. Let's see what actions you're doing in this sport and how you keep moving. Like, why is your shoulder constantly bothering you? Like, what are the pieces here? So we can actually like take what's happening in their life, deconstruct it down to the basics, and then actually be able to go forward with a treatment plan to help either release, strengthen, or get them just being more mindful about the positions or actions they're in throughout their day.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. They can only be with you so long any given day. I'm sure you've had clients or patients that have afterwards just mentioned to you, oh, just follow me around and just give me a massage all day, right? And,
oh my God. I wish you could just move in with me. I would love to, if I win the lottery, I'll have a massage therapist every day. And I'm like, what? No, please don't. And even some things that get me, you have folks come in, they do their massage. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go dig a bunch of holes to plant some trees right now. And you're like, well, that was a waste of an hour. Or they'd come in over and over and it's like, oh, were you feeling better after last time? No, not really. Oh, well, did you do those exercises? No, I didn't have time. And it's like, what am I doing? I don't want to just like take people's money and, just show up for an hour. I want to like make change for people. I want them to feel better.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying you want them to actually improve over time and, help them reach their pain-free goals or get them to do the things they want to do. Not just, oh, it feels good. Come in next week. We'll do this for the rest of your life because, it feels good. And you'll be happy because you're getting paid, and they'll be happy because they feel good for an hour or two afterwards. But it sounds like that's not the case. Right. Yes, that totally makes sense. So we need to make changes in their life. So what are the different types of massage? So it sounds like you're more into the therapeutic type of massage. I know you mentioned there's like a lifespan, if you will, typically on massage therapists, because it can be a very physical job, especially if you're doing more deep tissue therapeutic. What's the difference between that or a Swedish massage, or there's Rolfing, or there's hot stone massage, for example? What are the kind of differences there, and who should seek which type of treatment?
That's a great and a little bit loaded question. So yes. I prefer to practice the more therapeutic sports therapy. I do myofascial cupping as well, and that's a modality that I can't get enough of. I love, a lot of my clients love. We can kind of use it as a multitasking treatment. So I can put cups on their shoulder and then I can manually work their hips and low back. So I'm getting twice as much done in the time that I'm there. And especially with the cupping, with me digging my elbow into someone, it's going to be uncomfortable and I can only hold that pressure for so long. But with the cups, they have that negative pressure and they pull the tissue all apart. So the body stops fighting it eventually. It's like, oh, well, this doesn't go anywhere. I guess I'll just give up. So that kind of helps promote that release and breaking up some of that tissue better. Swedish massage, relaxation, that's more of like a feel good spa treatment, I kind of find. Even some of my clients, once we kind of get them to a place where they're feeling better, they're like, yeah, I'm just going to go to a spa or whatever just to get like a relaxing massage, because like I come here for therapy, I go there to just feel nice and have a nap on the table. So you might not nap while you're getting a therapeutic session, because it's not going to be always the nicest thing if you're wanting things to be fixed. But if you just want to hang out and just feel good, have someone rub oil into your skin, Swedish therapy is nice. Good for circulation or folks that can't handle a lot of pressure. If they have a lot of neurological issues where like sensitive touch on the skin is too much, that might be a better approach as opposed to therapeutic. Hot stone kind of falls in that same category. I've done it in the past, but it's not a modality that I found to be super helpful. Again, it was more that like spa, feel good kind of side, and I want to fix people, obviously. So the heat is nice. People often do like the cold stone too. I just find I didn't like really working into people with the rocks, because I can't feel what I'm doing through a rock and I don't want to hurt them. So right. Usually they're setting them on, rubbing people with it. It's pretty relaxing. Stuff like Rolfing, even Grassens and stuff like that, a little bit more intense, probably on the other side of therapeutic even, just because you're really participating in those ones whether you like it or not. I know a lot of folks have scraping done or Grassens even at like Pyros and things like that. And it's not something folks can often do for like a long hour session. It's a little too much on the body.
Right. So. They need to be able to catch their breath.
Exactly.
As you're digging in on them.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're kind of more therapeutic, not so much just relax, more you're having some type of problem. Let's get at it. Let's fix it. And you'd kind of mentioned with cupping how it has that sustained pressure. It's constant versus if you're more just doing deep tissue, it's hard to hold that pressure for a sustained period of time. That kind of leads into what you're doing with the mobility work, right? In terms of your training with functional range conditioning or functional range release, I believe.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what that is and how you utilize that for people.
So I'm very fortunate with all of my interests kind of coming together. Like I had my massage therapy background. When I got into aerials, it was a lot of strength building and flexibility. And I, not being a flexible person, was fortunate enough to start teaching stretch classes to help people and myself become a little bit more limber. And that kind of made me realize that there's this gap between what people think that they should do and what they need to do. So now with the mobility sessions, I have the background. So if something's tight and we're not getting ahead, I can be like, hey, let's try a massage. Let's relax your shoulders before we try to do all these exercises, all these specific joint work. Because if the muscles are tight, you're gonna kind of run into a wall a little bit there. So once that, we can kind of assess those things. With the mobility stuff, I can take it into exercises, strength, giving them those tools as far as like stretching and releasing at home, whether you're on a tennis ball or you're doing those Pails and Rails, making it a bit more active stretch in the FRC system, and even just working on that neurological connection. I find the biggest issue folks have is they don't have that brain-body connection a lot of the time, or they're missing a big chunk of it. So if we can get their brain properly connecting to the right muscles, change happens quite quickly and people feel a lot better. But when your brain only connects to A, B, and C instead of the rest of the alphabet, those get overused, they get tired, they get tight, they get weak sometimes. You get those repetitive strain injuries. So we're taking it from this small little thing where you only have a couple of muscles to use and being like, you have this whole body, let's figure out how to access it.
Okay, so it's bringing awareness to, if I'm understanding you right, it's bringing awareness of the person towards their whole body. Just kind of like if you've never run a marathon, or you've never run before, or you've never swam before, or you've never done physical work, something you've never done before, then the next day you're going to feel, muscles you never felt you had or thought you had. So similar kind of concept, but less painful, I'll say, it sounds like.
Yeah, not necessarily. It's uncomfortable at times. Like I find even for myself, I work pretty closely with my clients. Like I'll do the stretches with them so they can kind of see it. I can come over and help adjust. But even when I'm doing like Pails and Rails for hips, it's getting really deep into those like deep rotators that surround the joint. And even my hip joints are sore the next day because you're causing those muscles to have to wake up and strengthen and work when, there's a lot of bigger muscles around them that are happy to take the work, but that's not always what you want.
So just to back up a little bit, you've mentioned this a few times. What are Pails and Rails? I know those are acronyms, but what do they stand for?
Pails are progressive, angular, isometric loading, and Rails are regressive. So Pails, how I remember it, is you're pushing into that stretch, and Rails is you're trying to lift your, for example, your leg up. So if I'm doing like a leg Pails for hamstrings, I'm going to be, say, sitting in a straddle, and I'm going to focus on driving my one heel into the floor, hold that depending on the intensity that I'm doing, say let's 40 to 55% of my strength. Hold that after a 2-minute stretch, opening that system, hold that for 10, 20 seconds, release, keep that same posture, and then have to fire my quads to lift that leg in that same position. So you're really working the end ranges of your joint as opposed to just working on PRs, lifting as much weight as you can.
Okay, so essentially taking a joint, we're using the example of a hip here, you're going to take it to the end range. So let's say a straddle like it's in front of you, and the leg isn't really moving too much, but it's pushing down the one point, and then you're going to relax it, and then you're going to try to, again, it's at the end range, and you're going to try to lift it up and hold there. So you're working the opposite muscles of the joint. So you're trying to work all the muscles surrounding that joint at its end range.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting process. And a lot of times, especially with the rails, people don't have a lot of movement, whether it's hip flexion or internal rotation. Those are usually two I find people struggle with. Sometimes all that you do in those positions is just shake violently, and that still work. And people are like, oh, I'm not doing anything. I can't get my foot off the ground. Nothing's happening. And it's like, yeah, it is. If you're shaking, those muscles are still working. You may not be able to lift your heel off the ground now, but this is where it starts. Your body's not used to doing these movements. It's not used to turning on these muscles. So it's just fighting to figure out what's happening and then strengthening in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of waking up those muscles that, like we talked about, you didn't know you had. And I find that these kind of exercises are fantastic for people that have stiff hips. We're talking about hips, for example, and especially for those people that have maybe degenerative changes or some arthritic changes in those hip joints, and they may want to, postpone a surgery, or they're worried about surgery down the road. Let's say you're 60 years old and you have a, quote, bad hip. And, the doctors say it's bone on bone. It's not actually, but it is kind of wearing out a little bit. And you haven't been using those muscles in a long time. And you find that, different exercises aggravate it. This kind of exercise or these type of therapies, they're very low intensity. So it's not aggressive on the hip at all. And it definitely works those muscles surrounding that hip. And you're trying to optimize its mobility and its function. And sometimes I'm sure you've had some patients that have had these kind of hip problems, and they're able to go, they feel way better, and they may not even be a candidate anymore for a hip operation, or they can postpone it, like hopefully indefinitely, but definitely a longer duration.
Yeah, and the nice thing about FRC, it was such a great course to take, but they really focus from the joint outwards. So it's like, yeah, you might have told you had a bad joint, you might have these issues, but let's work at cleaning out that workspace in the joint. Let's work at getting you your range of motion in the joint, and then you can work outwards. So if you don't have overhead flexion because your glenohumeral joint cannot get there, then how are you doing like overhead presses? No, you're going to set yourself up for an injury because you're driving through a range of motion that you physically don't have. So many people come in with a shoulder or a hip or a low back, and it's like, everything hurts. I can't do anything. I was being active. Why do I still hurt if I'm trying? But oftentimes there isn't that connection sometimes with training, or even that, again, self-awareness that, if you're having to bend your elbows when you're going to overhead flexion, that's because your shoulder can't get into overhead flexion. So maybe that's not a safe position to be in to start with. So we want to open up those joints, get that range of motion, so then they can safely and effectively do the things that they want.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not able to get in certain positions without weight, if you add weight on there, you're just really loading a bad position, and that's a recipe for disaster. And
100%.
yeah, and I'm sure you get a lot of clients or patients that come in from some type of lifting injury, and a lot of times it's, they're causing it themselves because they don't have that required motion.
Yeah.
And then they keep driving into that, and they end up hurting themselves.
What I find funny is, you ask someone, oh, can you do the splits? Like, no, my hamstrings would rip. I would break in half. It'd be awful. So they refuse to do the splits because that's a very visual, marker of how much mobility or flexibility you have. But
Right.
They have no problem dumping into their low back if they're lifting overhead or overhead flexion. They don't think of it as the same way, but it is the same thing.
Right. Absolutely. And a lot of it too, you were talking about how it's more affecting the nervous system. So I find that a lot of people, they'll say, is it the muscles are tight, or it's the, the joints jammed up, but it's also the nervous system. Our nervous system's kind of that master control system. And if you aren't able to access a certain range of motion, your body's going to say, no, you can't do that.
It's
And
trying to
then,
protect.
yeah, it's trying to protect you. Exactly. So if you can't get there, oftentimes when you try to, it will, be painful because it's saying, I don't want you to damage yourself.
Totally.
So,
And I find sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was saying, even with, I got a lot deeper into that when it came into aerials, because especially with, it's kind of like I call it a less spicier version of Cirque du Soleil. So in Cirque, you see a lot of contortionists, people doing these unthinkable back bends and splits and butt to head, stuff like that. And while what I teach isn't quite as aggressive, you still have a lot of folks coming in with no prior mobility, flexibility background, unless they're naturally flexible or hypermobile, but even that poses some issues. So you have to train that nervous system. Like even when we start inverting in the hoops, you go upside down and your brain's like, where the hell am I? Where am I going? What is happening? Where are my limbs? So I often spot people and I'll tap their leg and they'll let go of a hand. And it's like, you have to figure out how to move upside down. So you have to get your nervous system involved, proprioception, working together. And even when it comes to certain activities, tricks that we do, sometimes we have to do a little bit of lat rolling to release things. Sometimes we do nerve glides because your nerves are going to be that stopping point because they're going to panic if you're going too far. So we need to teach something that doesn't stretch very well to stretch a little bit so that it will learn to trust that you're not going to injure it and it doesn't have to protect everything.
Right, absolutely. So going into aerials, what exactly is it? I know you kind of described it as Cirque du Soleil, a little bit less than that. So that to me, I just think, one, why would I do this? I don't want to fall on my head and hurt myself.
I hear that every single day.
I'm sure you hear it all the time. Yeah. And,
yeah.
You don't want to get a concussion. Some people may feel like, oh, I'm too fragile to do this. What type of people do this type of sport essentially, or this activity?
The best answer is it's for literally everyone if you're willing to try.
Okay.
So aerials in general can mean a lot of things. So it can mean pole, it can mean silks, trapeze, aerial hoop, which is what I teach specifically, straps, something where you're in the air. So my main focus here at Martinson Health, my company is Jade, and we just do aerial hoops right now. So not only is it a really cool activity to do, it's a workout. So each class we start with a warm-up, which is usually about 10 to 15 minutes, medium to high intensity. We do our conditioning. So it's various exercises, not only to help strengthen things like shoulders, especially because we're doing a lot of hanging, core, things like that, but to also get your muscles waking up, get your neurological system ready, and preemptively prepare for things that are coming. And then the next part of class is basically learning skills and tricks. So that's the fun aspect of it. Usually people struggle the most in the warm-up. That's probably the hardest part. But what I find really interesting is while hoop is challenging, it is very psychological. So I've taught men, I've taught women, all different age ranges. I've taught a few younger kids groups. And most recently, the group I'm having a lot of fun with is folks in like the 30s, 50s plus range, because they definitely come in and all I hear all the time is, oh, I would die, I'd fall on my head, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's my job to make sure you don't die. So we're not going to be doing splits and drops the first day. Let's start from the basics and build from there. So it's been really fun to have these oftentimes middle-aged women coming in and they're like, I don't know if I can do this. And just watching this like empowerment and confidence in themselves grow when they're like, wow, I didn't think I could do that, but now I can. And they'll take a photo of their hoop trick and show their family and friends. And their friends are like, wow, that's so amazing. I could never do that. So not only is it like physically good and mentally both challenging and rewarding, it's a super confidence builder. It's really empowering for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure you get a lot of people that, they might have some type of injury for example, shoulders, like it'd be very challenging on the shoulders, obviously. So someone might say, oh, I can't do that because I have a bad shoulder. But you and I both know that if you have a quote bad shoulder, well, it's going to continue to stay bad unless you strengthen it, unless you get some therapy done on it and strengthen it. And it sounds like this would be fantastic for that because it's definitely challenging on the shoulder.
Yeah. Well, and movement's the best medicine, right? So and one of the big thing, and especially too with my massage therapy background, I don't want to have to fix people from my class. So I want to train them right the first time. So we're going to focus on proper shoulder positioning, strengthening in those positions, being aware. My class sizes are usually pretty small, especially like my first level. So I have time to go around and help everyone. And I don't focus on just upper body. It's a great upper body strength builder, but I want the whole body to be strong. I want everything working together, because in hoop, it's hard to find something that you're not using all your muscle groups at some point. So we want everything working together. The thing that most people struggle with is what I call your good side and your off side. So just like when you write, your most dominant hand, super easy, you have no problem. But then your non-dominant hand, you're like, is this even attached to the same body? And that's what's so great about here. And even one thing I try to really hammer with my students is, did your offside, your good side, great, now do your offside. Do it twice even, so that you're building strength evenly through the body. One side's always gonna connect easier. Tricks will often be easier on one side than the other to start with, but we gotta work both to keep evenness through the body. We don't want any crazy imbalances. And we wanna challenge our brain in those positions. So it's an all-encompassing kind of fitness routine.
That's great. Yeah, and I remember in one of my classes, one of our profs would always say, you got to work both sides, because, it's not like Mondays, everyone comes in with a one-sided problem. It's, we live in a three-dimensional world. Things happen all around us. We got to be able to react to our environment, do things equally or not, maybe not equally, but well on both sides. And if you can't, then that's where you can run into those injuries and get hurt and so forth.
Absolutely.
That's great. Anything else that you'd like to mention that we haven't talked about?
Great question. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. The biggest thing is, especially here at Martinson Health, like we're just trying to encompass like a one-stop shop kind of wellness routine. Like even the chiropractors that I'm able to work with, like Dr. Sarah, everyone's really focused on not just like fixing you for now and sending you out. Like it's very much let's get you working for the long term. Let's solve problem. Let's work together to build you something that works and get you function back in your body. And it's just such like a wonderful and exciting environment to be in, because not every clinic or every massage therapy place is in that way. So it's really fun to be with a lot of like progressive, very thoughtfully minded people when it comes to health and wellness.
Right. So you guys aren't just trying to, someone comes in, they're sore. Okay, now let's band-aid you up, or, take the pain away, so you're feeling fine tomorrow. You want to get them, out of pain and then able to function as they go on through their life from, now let's say they're 20. So when they're 30, 40, 50, when they're 80 years old, they're fully functional, able to live a healthy and a well life without any limitations. So
Absolutely.
That sounds great. What would be the best way if anyone wants to reach out to you or have any questions or seek out your treatment or some of your classes?
Absolutely. So the clinic, Martinson Health, you can find us online. We have a whole webpage. My aerials is through there as well. My business page is Jade Aerial Fitness and Mobility. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. All my fun contact information is on there. I believe our website is martinsonhealth.com, and that has information on our Camrose, our awesome osteopath. We have Pilates here now, which are super fun and super challenging. We have a yoga studio, personal trainers. So it's as much of a one-stop shop as we could possibly make it. We have a doula and a pelvic health OT that comes in every so often. So we have a little bit of everything here. And we get folks that come from Forestburg, Edmonton, just because it's such a unique place to be.
Absolutely. What don't you guys have in that clinic?
We're missing a physiotherapist right now, and that's about it.
Okay, so if any physiotherapists are listening, definitely reach out, and they need your help there. That's great. Well, thanks a lot for your time here, Paulina. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll stay in touch.
Awesome, that sounds great. Thank you so much.